Businesses big and small have a huge role to play in addressing climate change through climate mainstreaming. Local projects and communities should be at the heart of shaping the best global future, but only if their voices can be heard.
Countries like Rwanda are losing 25 tons of topsoil per hectare per year.
Valerie Hickey is the Global Director for Environment at the World Bank. Mrs. Hickey, please tell us about your work and your role here at COP16.
So I'm the Global Director for Environment at the World Bank, and we're here at UNCCD COP16 right after we've been at UNFCCC COP29, right after we're at COP16 for the Biodiversity Convention, because our job at the end of the day is to help the poorest countries in the world and poor communities everywhere to adapt to the triple environmental crisis. Because what's happening in terms of climate change, what's happening in terms of land degradation and desertification means that families aren't able to put food on the table. Countries like Rwanda are losing 25 tons of topsoil per hectare per year. It means they're simply not able to feed themselves. They're not able to be part of global value chains because they're losing the productivity of their land. And we're here to help countries think through what are the solutions, to share some of our solutions so they can be scaled up, also to talk about some of the challenges, because we don't want to just hype up solutions that aren't real. We need to make sure that what we're talking about are scalable solutions that will work, that will be fit for purpose in the different environments that are suffering from, whether it's desertification, whether it's land degradation, whether it's climate change with too much water or too little water.
I know it's a broad subject, but what are some of the solutions you would like to point out that you're also sharing here today?
So I think in terms of solutions, we think about a couple of things that are foundational. The first is planning. And when we talk about planning, for us, it's a process that has to include all the stakeholders. We always say at the World Bank that if someone isn't around the table, their interests are going to be on the menu and they're going to be chewed up and spit out. Because at the end of the day, people have to co-create solutions that will fit their livelihoods. One of the biggest problems we've seen in development finance in the past generation is the boom and bust of project finance. Somebody comes in, creates a project without enough input from local communities. The project is okay once the money is there, but once the project developer leaves and the money dries up, the solutions don't stick because they're not indigenous solutions. They're not solutions that work for those communities. So process matters, having those communities, having micro and small business at the table. Too often when we talk about getting private sector at the table, we're talking about big business. But in fact, in most of the developing countries where we work, it's micro and small businesses that create 70% of employment. So those are the folks we want around the table as well. The second thing we think is fundamentally important, especially if we're going to unlock the power of markets, unlock the power of the private sector to help finance some of these solutions, is policy certainty. In too many countries, there is uncertainty around policy. Nobody knows, for example, who owns the land. You can't possibly do land restoration and get the private sector to invest in land restoration if you don't know who owns the land. Because who's going to invest in something that will take 7 or 8 years to create a return if in 7 or 8 years you don't know if you'll still be able to access the land? You certainly don't own it. And particularly for women-headed households, when they don't have land tenure, when their names aren't on titles, they can't go to the bank and raise the kind of capital they need to start small businesses. This is something we do in countries like Burundi, where we're working with women as their husbands have often left home to go work in mines across the border in the DRC to bring some money home. Those women are left trying to feed their kids, trying to work on small plots of land. Once we help them get their name on land titles, they can go to their local banks, they can raise a little bit of capital and start being part of the solution, not just looking for a handout, but actually for a helping hand up through their local banks. And so that's an important part of the solution too.
Tell us some more about climate finance, please.
So at the World Bank Group, we're proud to say that last year we invested about 45% of our total volume of lending in climate finance. For us at the World Bank Group, we invest about $100 billion a year. So that was $44 billion worth of climate finance. For us, we work both on decarbonization and helping countries shift to clean energy, but we also work on adaptation. And in particular, for those countries that are suffering from desertification, from land degradation, countries across the Sahel and West Africa, for example, who have had no role in creating the climate crisis, we have to help them adapt. We have to help figure out how do we provide money that will allow them to restore land, will allow them to create livelihoods, be part of larger supply chains, so that they can actually build a path out of poverty while combating the climate crisis. So we use our financing, we use it to de-risk for the private sector, because we know at the end of the day climate solutions are going to come largely financed through the private sector. And so we have to, in places where the risks are too high or the returns are too low, we have to de-risk. But then also on the public sector side, we're investing in policy reform to create policy certainty, to make sure that there is clarity for the private sector in terms of what it is they can expect, how they can work with a competent partner on government. So we're investing in that as well. And we're investing in a lot of economic infrastructure, making sure that it's resilient against climate change, resilient against desertification and drought, so that this economic infrastructure can work for everybody, and including for the private sector, and ensuring that their returns on investment can be a little bit larger.
How important is the cooperation between the public and private sectors?
It's fundamental. At the end of the day, we can't combat the climate crisis, we can't combat desertification, drought, or land degradation without private sector at the table, because private sector is everybody from that woman-headed household who's a single family working the land, they're a private sector entity, to the largest multinationals who are generating enormous amounts of goods and services that are changing the landscape. But none of that happens without the public sector, without government. Because government has to be a reliable, competent partner who can help the private sector through creating certainty, being a good business partner, helping simplify the rules and regulations around which private sector can invest. Because at the end of the day, private sector works on a risk-reward basis. And having a good government partner can reduce risk, but having them then invest in public infrastructure can increase reward. You do that, reduce risk, increase reward, you're going to get a lot more private sector investment that sticks and helps to create the financing flow to create paths out of poverty through people building their own businesses, being part of other businesses, and that's what we're in business to do.
What is climate mainstreaming?
So for us, climate mainstreaming means thinking about, in everything we do, making sure it's resilient against climate change, so that if we help countries invest in economic infrastructure, let's just talk about linear infrastructure, roads, that they're not going to get washed away in the next flood, or they're not going to erode because of a drought. So thinking through, how do we mainstream climate in the design of that road? How do we think about nature-based solutions as part of that? Because they can accrue value over time, they can be cheaper in the long run to invest in. So for us, thinking about climate change as an opportunity to make sure that economic infrastructure is fit for purpose in the landscape in which it's built, but also as an opportunity for communities to get more access to development. Because at the end of the day, when it comes to climate adaptation, it's usually about doing more development, doing it better, and doing it faster. And that, for us, is what climate mainstreaming is all about.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.